Good evening, friends. Happy Thursday night. Welcome to the Seven Pillars Talk Show with Theresa Pore, helping you build your unbreakable life with our 7 pillars of becoming unbreakable. Well, tonight we have an amazing treat for you. And in our 7 pillars, one of the things that we really dig into is how we expand our thinking and how we take ourselves to the next level. So our 7 pillars, as a recap: self-discovery, our mindset and mind shift, and that's where we're going to dig in today. Our belief system and patterns, our defining moments and or trauma, our health, our community, and finally, we're now able to discover our purpose. Well, tonight I want to introduce you to a special friend of mine, Coach Jayme. We have been friends for a couple of years now, and we're walking down similar paths. And one of the things that we have in common is we love to challenge our friends to think a new thought and to see things from a fresh perspective. And that's exactly what Jayme does in her transformational mind shifting coaching platform. So I'm going to bring Jayme on. I want her to just say hello, greet you, and then we're going to dig in and we're going to challenge you tonight to have a fresh perspective, see things from a new angle, and hear some stories that may help you do just that. So welcome, Jayme. We're so excited to have you, Coach Jayme.
Hello, Theresa. Thank you so much for having me. I am so excited to be here.
Well, it's so good to have you back in my house. Of course, last time you were in my house, we did a mindset class. We did masks and mindset. Do you remember
that? We did. That is correct. That was such a great time. That was clearly far too long ago, though. That's the only problem with that.
But thanks to technology and thanks to the 7 Pillars Talk Show, we can be on tonight and we can reach even more people, helping them build their unbreakable life. So, Coach Jayme, one of the things that I love about you, besides your amazing smile and your dynamic personality, is the way that you challenge people through your coaching and your mentorship, and really just everywhere you go. I see that people are drawn to you and they're challenged in your presence to think bigger and to dream bigger. And so I want to tell you that that is something I love about you and I appreciate so much. Where did that come from? I was actually talking to somebody in my networking group this morning that we all have like this negative bias in our mind that makes us want to see things from a protective and a preservation place. But you just break that mold and people just see the joy that you carry. Where did that come from, Jayme? Please tell us a little bit about yourself and how did you get to where you're at today?
Oh, wow. That's a very loaded question. And thank you for the amazing compliments. That is very, very kind of you. Hopefully, like you say those very same things to yourself in the mirror, because I have just so much love and awe for the way that you shine and you show up for so many people too. So it's such a blessing to know you. But I guess the way that I always just kind of like to share my story is, I have a pretty diverse resume personally and professionally, and none of us make it through life without adversity anyways. But unfortunately, I experienced just a lot of different forms of adversity at a very, very young age, between a lot of different types of death, a broken home, abusive relationships, drugs, alcohol, attempts of suicide, lost people to murder and suicide. Rape was something that had happened. Career-wise, I burnt myself out and got put on bed rest with a kidney infection at the age of 25. So a lot of just stuff happened in a short amount of time. And I knew chaos far better than I did calm, because when things were calm, that meant things were about to hit the fan. So running and chaos was actually like my drug of choice, because that was how I felt like I knew I could stay in control. And sitting down and actually having to sit with my own thoughts to even recognize whatever type of cognitive bias was there, whatever my actual thoughts were, I was just completely oblivious. I have a post that I kind of will resurface from time to time that it always says, you can run, but you can't hide. It's just kind of like in the movie Halloween, right? Like Jason always, even though he's walking after you and you're sprinting through the woods, like he always catches you, even if it's just at a slow pace that he's right behind you. And that was very much what my thoughts and my insecurities and my way of trying to make it through life had me doing. And so when I finally was like knocked down for the count and I had no choice, like that was one of my many come to Jesus moments, that like what I'm doing isn't working. So as much as what I would like to say, there was this magical, glorious epiphany of a moment where like things were finally awesome. No, it was a lot of just nitty gritty work that went into finally facing my demons and taking my thoughts captive so I could decide what perspective I was going to take, both based off of those emotions and those thoughts.
Yeah. I'm hearing all this and I'm thinking of, of course, my situation, and some of the listeners with Unbreakable know that there was this concentrated amount of time, like this 3-year period where like everything that felt like could go wrong. And you know what, Jayme? One of my favorite songs of worship during that time was New Wine. And I'm thinking, I am literally asking for the crushing and the pressing. Like, what am I thinking? But there's a piece of that song that just made me think about you right now. And it said, in the soil, I now surrender. And it's like, I'm finally at my lowest place. I'm ready to surrender. Like, okay, what are you doing? Right. I love that. And, there is a choice though, right? There is a choice. You could have chosen a very different outcome. You were justified, as well as probably myself and many others, to take a thinking pattern of victimhood or to, go down this very different path that would not serve anybody, including yourself. What do you think was that mind shift that you had, or like I like to say in the Unbreakable Life Journey, that moment where you said, I am taking back my power? What do you think that moment was, or was it a series of moments?
It definitely wasn't an immediate one. I always like to say that God definitely made me stubborn, but I'm a slow learner. And he's like, yeah, let me just have to ram this in your face about 4 times before you finally get it. So it works until it doesn't, right? So those moments of surrender and being knocked all the way down has happened quite a bit. I've gotten more resilient to that, but definitely one of the ongoing lessons I learned in life. But for me, I think there's kind of 2 things. One, it was just, there's a quote that says, real growth is when you're tired of your own junk, your own crap. Yeah. And so it was like, when I finally got so sick and tired of feeling tired, I channeled that energy into like, okay, what I'm doing isn't working. And how many more times am I going to keep beating myself into this sense of misery? It's going to be hard regardless. So like, let's just try something different rather than repeating this, because this clearly doesn't work. I do also have to pair that with the fact that luckily I just kind of got really drawn to like quotes and like motivational stuff. And so for me in the beginning, I think probably one of the most pivotal moments, it was probably back, probably like 10 years ago at this point. And I was running on fumes per usual, because that's just what I did. And I would get up at 4 o'clock every single morning. And I felt weird to make it about myself at the time. And I was very distant from my faith and everything. So I was literally trying just to control everything that I could control. Sure. But I would wake up and I would not want to get out of bed. But I would look for a motivational quote and I would send it to people first thing in the morning. Wow. Usually it was because it always resonated with me. But at the time it was that I thought that like, because I had a mentor that had told me one time that the best way to feel better about yourself is to go do something kind for somebody else. Yeah. So that was great until it wasn't, because that became like so much of an addiction that like I was depleting myself fully. But it did help me start that habit of pouring into people and wanting to help motivate them. And I remember there would be certain days where it's like I didn't want to get out of bed or I just wasn't up for it. And all of a sudden I would get a text message and people would be like, are you okay? And I was like, yeah, why? They're like, we didn't get our message from you this morning. Wow. So I think it was just even a combination of just circumstance of these tiny little things that were taking place that I didn't even realize. And then I started, although it became an addiction, the pendulum swing went too far, where I became obsessed with personal development. but it made me latch on to a lot of mentors and people that were able to kind of help me grow. So that was probably the biggest, those were the biggest things that impacted that.
I love that. And I think we're allowed to latch on to anything, right? Thank goodness it was a very healthy latching, and it was something that took you in a new trajectory. Sometimes it's not that case. Sometimes it's something very different. But I do love that. And I believe, I read a story one time, and I can't remember what it was, but this woman had like MS, and like she couldn't feel better no matter what she did. And somebody challenged her for 28 days to just give something away, right? Give something to somebody. And she did. And at the end of that 28 days, she was healed. And because there is something about giving of ourselves and thinking of others and, loving our neighbor. And so I think that that's a beautiful, beautiful situation. And one of the things that, as I meditate often on the scripture of love your Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. One of the things that the Lord keeps reminding me is a lot of people don't love themselves. And if we're going to love our neighbor as ourselves, we got to start loving ourselves better so we can take care of other people better. And so we don't go into that place of feeling like imposter syndrome where we're like, I'm given, but this really isn't me. Like, this isn't really what I've got going on. And I know you help a lot of people, more women, I believe, but I know you help a lot of people with learning how to love themselves. Before we go there, I want to know, what's your favorite quote? And I'm going to share mine too.
That is going to be the hardest question you could ever ask me, because it definitely depends on the moment. But honestly, there's so many, but I'm going to go with this one because I probably consistently quote this at least 60 times a week. We need water to survive, but water can also kill us.
Ooh, talk about that.
Yeah. I've kind of dripped little nuggets of that thus far, right? Too much of anything can kind of become a problem. And so even when, personal development became the drug of choice, just because it wasn't meth doesn't mean that it didn't have an opportunity to completely cause destruction. Working too much, resting too much, like too much of anything is going to be a problem. You have to learn how to sit in the middle of those two worlds. I always think of that too, like in regards to, I as much as what I even use it in my business is because it's like a key phrase. Like I really don't like the term work-life balance, because I believe if like you are genuinely like content in who you are, and you're showing up authentically in that personally and professionally, that's more where harmony comes, rather than managing 50% of my time in work and 50% in that. But there's another quote that is, just the key to finding balance is knowing when you've lost it. And so it's like kind of with that whole pendulum swing of, water is needed to survive, but it can also kill you, is like, you have to recognize when you're tapping too much into one side over the other, when you're being too truthful and you're not giving enough grace, or vice versa, or you're being too businessy and not enough servant-like, right? Or vice versa. So I just think that it is so applicable in every single area of our lives.
I love that. I love it. And what I love is that is a personal testament of what you discovered. And that's why it's so solid to you, right? And I think we're allowed, again, to walk through things, because then it becomes, when it's attached to you. I was actually talking to somebody yesterday. I met her for lunch, and she was telling me that she was going to be leading a message at her church, and she had two choices, and one of them was obvious to her. And you talked about authentic self. Anytime there is something that is us, that we're involved with it, that it affected us, it gives us this new level of authenticity or credibility or something along those lines, and we can latch onto it, and it can be kind of a mantra, good or bad. Hopefully it's more on the good realm, but I love that. I'm going to have to remember those quotes, because I think those are beautiful. My favorite quote is going to go right in line with what we're talking about all together here today. And that is from Carl Jung. And it was, those who look outside dream. And I think about what the phase that you were in, the phase that I was in. Like, I was looking on the outside and I was thinking, man, wouldn't that be cool? Or I was like, why can't I get to that place? And all of the things, like, looking out, projecting out. My eyes are definitely focused out. So you think you're looking in the right direction. But then he says, those who look inside awaken. And that's the beauty. Like, that's understanding who Coach Jayme is and who Theresa Pore is. And once we know that, that's where I think that beginning again of that harmony can start showing up, because now I'm free. Like, I don't have to worry about all that other stuff. I can just be free to be me, right?
That's so good. That is so good.
Yeah, I love it. Love it, love it, love it. Okay, so tonight's topic that we want to really share with you guys is mind shifting. And, we've heard for so long that our mindset matters. And of course, our mindset matters. If we have a positive mindset, we're going to be able to handle situations a lot better, usually, with a lot better of an outcome, usually, than if we have a negative mindset. I am a firm believer, though, that our mindset is where we're at today. Our mind shift is the trajectory of where we can go. It is what will take us in a new direction. And so there are a lot of moments in my life when I look back and I'm like, oh, that was a mind shifting moment. I didn't always recognize them as that. But now I'm looking for opportunities to see things from a different angle, because if we're not careful, what can happen is we get so boxed in to where all of our filtering process, we're just seeing things from one perspective, and without any shifting, we don't make any movements. And so tonight, Coach Jayme and I really want to dig into that aspect a little bit. And I want her to talk about some areas where she's had to have some mind shifting, and Coach Jayme, maybe a couple of areas where, obviously with, privacy and all that, but how you've helped people see things from a new place.
Absolutely. Yes. Yes to all of the things. I'm excited. I can talk about this all day long. So this is great. Where would you like me to start? Yes.
Let's start with, what are your feelings, particularly on mindset and mind shift? Because mindset's kind of a buzzword. We hear about it all the time. And people will say, well, if you would just change your mindset, if you would just do this, we hear a lot of things of people just kind of throwing words around. Can you talk first about what a mindset is?
So I loved your perspective of that. And this is the other thing that I think is so beautiful that we're having this conversation, is because how boring would it be if we all saw things exactly the same? That would defeat the purpose of having a reason to shift and have different perspectives. Mindset, I think that is very much the storyline that you are repeating in your head. And I a lot of times I will like to say that, like, to me, I think that the brain is similar to like a muscle in the gym. Like, we have to train it. We have to strengthen it. We have to spend time under tension. We have to get uncomfortable if we want it to grow. We have to keep it healthy. We have to keep it active. And, I think part of that is from a mindset, is similar to what you talked about with the negative, cognitive bias, is that because that's meant for survival mode, right? Like, you don't want to go against the grain. It's uncomfortable to do that because safety lies in being in numbers and doing what's comfortable. And so, I think it serves its purpose, but I think that so many different ways I could take this. Along with shifting your mindset, I promise I'm not just going to sit here and quote people all day long, but like I said, I'm a sucker for a good quote. It's in The Power of Now. And he says, do you control your thoughts, or do your thoughts control you? And the first time I ever heard that, I was like, well, it's my brain. Of course I can't control that. Like, whatever it thinks is what it's going to think. And so I was literally like in chains to my own brain, just trusting anything and everything that it said. And so shift in perspective. I struggle a little bit with the whole speaking my truth. And the reason why I feel that is because not only are you fixated on that storyline or that mindset that is true today, that
Right.
doesn't mean it's going to be tomorrow or next year or 10 years from now, but you also have a lot of other variables at play. You have your circumstances, you have the external things that are taking place, but then you also have emotions. And not everything we think or feel is true. It may be it in the moment, but that requires emotional regulation. And again, being able to actually even acknowledge a thought as it's happening before we even think about shifting it. Because if we don't know what story we're telling, if we don't know why we're feeling or thinking a certain way, how are we ever going to challenge it or shift it anyway?
Sure. So let's walk through that before we move on, because you started at the beginning of the conversation with talking about transforming and renewing our minds, right? What if I don't know how to renew my mind? What if this is my thought pattern and I don't know how to analyze it? I don't even know how to put a name on an emotion. Like, can you talk a little bit about, how you would walk somebody through that process of dissecting that thought a little bit to say, is this my truth? Like, is this really how I feel? And why do I feel this way?
So how I'm going to answer it is kind of almost how you asked the question. Be curious. We live in a world that is so fixated on it being right and wrong and trying to prove a point on that we're missing the point. We're not listening or living to understand. We're trying to show up to speak louder than the other person or to let our pride or ego step over. And, I think it's important that, because I also talked about being my authentic self. So I would be contradicting myself if I now am bashing, my truth or whatever. But again, the pendulum swing, we have to find that middle ground. And so the biggest thing that I could say is that don't be so fixated on trying to psychoanalyze yourself that this is what's right and this is what's wrong. It's like, hey, here I am sitting with a flower in my hand. What am I thinking? I don't know. There's a flower in my hand. How do I feel right now? I don't know. I guess this is kind of putting a smile on my face. I feel kind of warm and cozy inside. So I think this means I feel good. Get curious with it before you even try to start. It's like, if you don't know how to solve a math problem, you can't just all of a sudden know how to do it if you don't know the steps to how to solve it. So it's like,
but I want to pause there for a second. I love that. We're also in a world where calculators are at your fingertips, Jayme, where you don't even have to use your mind so much. And we are inundated, with knowledge and information all the time. And other people are speaking into our ears all the time. And almost to the point where a lot of people find it very difficult to get still and ask themselves those questions. So, and maybe I already know my take on this, which would be find some time to be still. One of the things that I've learned to do is if we were to try to analyze every single one of our thoughts, we probably wouldn't get much done. Probably wouldn't be super duper productive. But one of the things that I've learned to do is when I am triggered for any reason, whatever it is, if I get mad at my kid, my husband, if I start feeling like maybe I was rubbed the wrong way, whatever, that's when I go into an analysis place. That's when I say, okay, what's really going on here? What do I really think is happening? And I feel like in those moments, I can learn so much about myself.
Absolutely. Especially if you stay curious. And there's 2 points that I want to make on this. I feel weird plugging it, but I guess it's appropriate in this scenario. That's literally why I have my podcast called Make Time for Your Mind, is because right now, everybody, knowledge is not the problem. We are in an abundance of more knowledge than we've ever had before that is constantly just even speeding up more and more. Knowledge is not the problem. Action of that knowledge, implementing the knowledge is the problem. But the problem also with that is that, yes, the convenience of these bad boys right here but then also the fact that we are so unattached to ourselves, that we are so influenced by everybody else around us that at the end of the day, we don't even know who we are. We don't know how to spend an hour in silence and just sit with ourselves. So how would we know how to think for ourselves? How would we know how to identify what we feel if we don't actually spend time with me, myself, and I? And so I think that that is also in the process of being curious, is just genuinely making time to sit through, like, why is it that I genuinely feel this way about this issue? Why is it that I actually think this? Like, trap yourself almost in those type of arguments of like, who told me this? Did I tell this? Where did this come from? So I think that's part one. Two, I'm going to botch the statistic, but hopefully it's at least rough enough. They say that on average, we think 40 to 60,000 thoughts per day. 80% of those are negative and carry over into the next day. We aren't meant to know every single thought that we're thinking. And so it's like being in a world that is constantly telling us to go, 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 like, let's just slow down and take it for what it is. Like, sometimes it's not worth like entertaining a thought that crossed our mind. Like, just because we think it doesn't mean we have to sit with it. But again, that's where it takes discernment to learn how to sit with yourself enough to recognize what truly matters to you and what doesn't, and where it's worth spending your energy and where it isn't.
Absolutely. I love that. Say the name of your podcast again.
Make Time for Your Mind with Coach Jayme.
I love it. You guys got to check that out. We got to check that out. You know, I love, there was one other thing that you said. You said, listen, we're listening to respond instead of listening to understand. And, you know, okay, quote junkie, like, I love to read, you know, and so one of my favorite books is 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And he really talks about that in itself, is listen to understand. But I want to take our viewers into a different thing that Stephen Covey talks about in that book. And this is where I really began learning about mind shifting. And now his book is not about mind shifting, but his book is about challenging us to think a different way. And one of the things that he talks about in this book that I love to share, because it was so profound to me, is that he had just finished an event. I don't know what kind of event it was, if it was speaking to 20,000 people or like what he was doing. But he just finished this event and he decided to take the train home from the event. And you guys know why, because he probably wanted to decompress. He probably just wanted to chill and calm down and just self-reflect, kind of, you know, get away from all of the noise. And so did probably everybody else on that train. Well, he gets situated, they make another stop, and all of a sudden a man comes in. And the only reason they knew the man came in is because he had 3 kids with him. And these kids were rambunctious and they were throwing stuff and they were yelling across the train at each other. And they were just acting like they needed to be spanked, right? I mean, they needed some discipline and some control. And Stephen Covey knew it. And he let it go as long as he could. And finally, he kind of nudged the man and he said, "Hey, don't you think you should do something about those kids?" And he said the man just kind of like turned his face a little bit and wiped his eyes. And he said, "What? Oh, I guess I should do something about those kids, except their mom, we just left the hospital and she passed away. And I don't even know what to do with myself in this moment, let alone what to do with these kids." And Stephen said, everybody on that train had a mind shifting moment, because when he came on and when he and those kids were rambunctious and out of control, everybody thought they knew what was going on. They saw something from a very specific place, and their beliefs and everything in them said, this is how you deal with unruly kids. But without access to information, without questioning the situation, just like Coach Jayme and I were talking about, sometimes we've got to question our own thoughts to see if they're relevant and true. Sometimes we have to have conversations with somebody on the train with us so that we can get access to more information and a bigger picture, so that we can then use that empathy muscle that we've gained to love them and to see them where they're at. Instead of the mindset that has carried us to this place, our mind can be expanded and how we can show love and grace to some people. Coach Jayme, I'd love for you to share your take on that story and how perhaps you use something along those lines to really show what mind shifting is really all about.
Yeah, I think so. There's a couple layers to this, which one, what a humbling story. And by the way, this is why you're a phenomenal speaker. Like I could just I was just soothed the whole time. You're just sharing somebody else's story. I love it. But I guess the first part that comes to my mind, and this goes back to where we have this obsession of making everything our truth, that we're missing the point, and we're missing the world that's actually around us because we are so engulfed with ourselves, whether it's a pity party we're sharing, whether it's goals we're trying to hit. We are the number one character in our own stories. Yeah. And so is everybody else. So we naturally assume talking sometimes, I could now all of a sudden, because we have this time together, I could be 3 days ago being well, and I'm just making this up as I go. Well, I wonder if Theresa has this lined up, is this. And I'm assuming that I'm the only thing that's going on in your life until Thursday, right? It's so easy for us to project that and assume that because we're the main character in our stories, that we are also the main person that comes to mind in everybody else, which is why now, especially when emotions get involved, when we are now tired and we are not maybe as sharpened to handle a situation, accordingly, that we miss what's going on in front of us. So I guess that's one take that comes to mind. But another story that just kind of popped into my brain, it's always a humbling moment, and I'm definitely not perfect in this, but it's how many times people will be upset that they got stuck in traffic. And I'm there was literally a 5-car pileup. Thank God that wasn't you. Somebody just lost their entire family, and you're upset that you couldn't make it to the bar with your friends in time. It's really not that serious. And it sometimes it takes something harsh to shift our perspective.
Right.
And we're humans, so that's going to be the case. But if we can practice more of being aware, I think that is something. Emotional intelligence and self-awareness are two things that I think that we lack as a majority within our society. Again, because we're just being influenced by all this knowledge, so we can recite all this knowledge, but we're not actually really truly resonating it, other than through the lens that we want to resonate with it, because it's not a two-way conversation. It's just us receiving information, and we match that to the storyline of us being the number one character in the story, missing out on everybody else. The keyboard warriors that have something to say about how you put on a snippet from a 45-minute conversation, and now you're getting all this backlash, and you're context matters. If you would have taken the time to listen and not just assume, this would have been a completely different ball game. So I think that the movie that just keeps popping into my brain, and I was going to say this earlier, but it circled back. Did you ever watch James and the Giant Peach, the movie?
I don't think so.
Okay. So do you know are you aware of the storyline of it?
A little bit, yes.
Okay. Yeah. So it's this little boy who ends up having to be with his evil aunts, and there's this nasty rhino that apparently kills his parents. It's a kid's movie. But he all of a sudden eats this magic worm, and it the movie turns into a cartoon, but this worm expands this massive peach. And that's how he escapes from living with his aunts, to be able to get away. And he wants to go to New York City. And this big peach floats all the way to New York City on this adventure where there's a spider and a grasshopper and a centipede and all this stuff. But he's in this story inside this peach with them. But there's a part where he's super, super afraid, and this scary rhino is trying to destroy him before he makes his full escape to New York City. And one of I think it was the grasshopper or something, who had encouraged him along this journey. And he's try looking at it another way. Wow. And he then all of a sudden was I don't have to be afraid anymore. Yeah. I'm stronger than this. This isn't real. I can overcome this. And then he ends up overcoming and making it, and all is well, happily ever after. And so I think that that is, even if there is any tip that I can say in the midst of being curious, is that when you come to a conclusion on something in your day,
Mm-hmm.
like, and especially if it's something that you're feeling super emotionally charged on, most likely in the negative, I would challenge you to ask yourself that. Try looking at it another way. How else can I see this same exact scenario from a different vantage point? And how much different does it look, right? The car accident, the train ride. This is how I'm seeing it, but how could this be viewed in some other type of situations? And then do those emotions have as much hold on me as they did before?
Yeah, I love that. I love that story. I may have to watch it.
It's such a cute movie.
That's fun. I was thinking as you were talking, I was thinking about we internally, I feel like the way we're made in a flesh world, right, is that we're internally selfish. Like we are designed to take care of ourselves. That is just, that's the thing. And so I think a lot of times we even come to a place where we idolize our own opinions, where we get so behind our belief that we become unmoldable. We can't budge, we can't move. And I think in those moments, a lot of times, again, even if it's a positive thing, even if it's like I'm okay and everything's fine, but I'm still like 100% controlling the outcome and just believing that this is my, like you said, truth. Those are places where we get stuck. And I think of a mindset. I think of a Jello mold, and this sounds so silly, but to me, brains kind of always remind me of like a Jello mold.
Yeah.
It's kind of, and if it's set, it can jiggle a little, but it's really not moving, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if our neurons are firing and things are happening, and we open up, like we just open a window a little bit and just see a little fresh, a little bit more of a perspective, sometimes it can literally transform everything for us.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever had one of those moments where you saw something and then you saw something?
Girl, this happens daily.
Right?
Yes.
It's like, I see it. Oh my gosh, I see it. Like, I see something that I've never seen before. Even if it was in front of me the whole time, once you've opened that window just a little bit, it's like you can see something from a whole new place. Can you share one of those moments where maybe you felt like, oh, this was a shift?
Yes, so many come to mind. I actually, and I haven't picked up in a while. This is my accountability to probably do so, I'm not going to lie. I had written a book back in 2021, and it's been sitting there and I just haven't published it yet. But what it is it's literally, I think I'm up to, from the last time that I looked at it, I'm up to, I think, 138 different quotes that I've put into this book and how they impacted my life, but also how I had perceived them at the time. Yeah. And when I was going back about a year or two ago and I was reading some of them, it was crazy how those same exact quotes didn't hit the same way they did in that season of my life. Sure. And one of the main ones that I remember that like had the biggest impact on me was take what you need and leave the rest. Mm. And for me at the time, that used to feel like such a suffocating quote, where for me, it was that, because of also just kind of growing up in a family where, we didn't have a lot. And so like we had to be grateful for what we had. And like we had to save. It was very much like scarcity on things, right? And so it was like, I can't have more because I need to have just enough, because that's all I need. And I have to leave the rest for somebody else. Right. And so that meant a lot in that area of my life of when I first had it, of like, take what it is that I need in this season and what I need to do. And the rest I need to give to other people. Like, I can't be selfish. I need to just leave more at the table for everybody else because I only need this. And then I remember I dated a guy at the time and he totally did not agree with me. He goes, what do you mean? He's like, if we go to a pizza party and somebody's like, here's some pizza. He's like, technically, I would only need one piece. He goes, but if it's available, why wouldn't I take 3 or 4? And I'm like, because you don't need it, right? And so like, it was just this like constant, like that was sitting there of it. But then a couple years later, especially as I started like getting more and more into my coaching business, it shifted to something completely different, where it was, listen, and I'm going to actually, I'm big on taking action steps. I will use this right in live time as we're talking. Sure. I usually say this when I do any type of presentation: take what you need and leave the rest. We've been talking for 40 minutes. There is no way you are going to retain all this information. Take the key nuggets that were profound for you. Forget the rest. Use something powerful and take action and move with it forward. So complete, like, ball got thrown out into left field compared to how I completely saw it. It wasn't just I saw it from that person's vantage point. I took it into a completely different context that had nothing to do with that.
Yeah. I think that's amazing. And there are different seasons in our life organically, I believe, where, you know, even reading a book, right? Our subconscious mind is going to collect this piece of information today because it's relevant and it's timely and it's something that I need. And tomorrow, it may be a different relevant, timely, and we're like, whoa, did new words appear? No, you just didn't need them at that time, yes. Right? And so I love that. And, you know, one of the things that I share about at Unbreakable is God took me through this journey, and I call it the 5 shifts. And I'm not going to go into those today. But you can come and find out at Unbreakable. But one of the things that he showed me in this time where I was really digging back in, and I will say to everybody, there are seasons in our life that we need to show up for people, because that's part of what we do, that we show up for people. And there are seasons in our life that we need to show up for ourselves. And there was a season that I needed to show up for myself. And because I needed something, I wasn't any longer in a place that I could give out anymore. You know, Jayme talked about that earlier, where she was giving and giving. And eventually I became so depleted that I needed to reestablish. Really, I needed the Lord to fill my cup. But during that season, I had pulled back from a lot of different things. And one of those stories, or my mindset around something that had happened to me, kept circling in my mind over and over and over. And the mind shift moment that I had in that was, I literally felt like a drop from the Holy Spirit that interrupted that thinking pattern that said, you don't want people to find out about that? You tell them. It was like, whoa, like that's a shift in thinking, but so profound, which actually led me on to the trajectory of being vulnerable and transparent enough to share my story, which is where the 7 pillars came from, which is where the whole Unbreakable life came from, of allowing others a space to become vulnerable and transparent so that we can get through those things that have tried to hold us hostage and get to the place where we're handing out keys to freedom for people around us. And that became such a powerful moment. And I want to challenge everybody that's watching with us tonight. Where are those moments in your life where you maybe feel like you are controlling the outcome too much from a biased place? And where are those places where maybe you have seen just a tiny shift in thinking that have expanded you to a place where you're like, I see it. And it may not make any sense to your neighbor because maybe they still have the same way of thinking, right? Or it may not make sense to your coworker. It may not make sense to your spouse or your kids. But when you have those mind shifting moments, we want to recognize them and take note with them because they're there for a very important reason.
Yeah, I think a pivotal moment for me as a recovering control freak is, you know, very much I would always I lived in the mindset of I can only control what I can control. And I was right. That is very true. Sure. However, the humbling part to that statement is just how little of control that really is.
Amen.
Because with what you were just saying, right? Like so fixated on what you want the outcome to be that you think that you're in control by trying to manipulate situations, trying to fit things into these certain areas but still there is an entire world at play that is going to be able to have the opportunity to shift all of what that is anyways. And so when you recognize that truly, like just how you choose to respond to things are pretty much the only thing that you have control over, like it's scary, but it's also so very freeing.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think one other thing, and it's on my heart to share this too. We are so, because of it's a beautiful thing that we have social media and all of this amazing opportunity and this encouragement and mentorship of ways to be able to live the most ultimate, successful, joyful life, right? Like that's, everybody's trying to sell you happiness. But what people are missing is that like, we're never going to escape adversity. Like, just like the weather, like just because it stormed really bad last night doesn't mean it's never going to storm again. And I think people are so focused on trying to live this perfect life and have everything fall into alignment that they're actually missing the lessons that life is trying to teach them along the way for where they are in that moment. Again, like I'm going to keep taking it back to like finding that happy medium that like, yes, you have to put forth effort. Yes, you've got to take action, but you also have to just let yourself like be a human experiencing the human experience.
Yeah.
Let what comes, and then you get to decide what to do with it from there. But like, you can't fully control the outcome.
No, we can't. And you're right. That is a very humbling place to be. And again, back to, I think I talked about new wine earlier. Did I talk to you about that? Yes. Okay.
Yes.
I talked a lot today.
There's been so many in here. We can't keep track anymore.
But you know, when I talk about it's in the soil that I now surrender, right? It's in the places sometimes where I've realized I don't have any control about this. And it's okay. Like when I trust you, I don't need to understand, right? And that's where we can truly not only become the most authentic piece of ourselves, but also the most usable piece for the purpose that was established in our lives. When we come to the place where we're like, whatever it is will be, right? And you are just willing to use those learning lessons that you've been given, those key things, even like our vulnerabilities, all of those things that we've walked through to help somebody else. I really think that is the purpose of life that we have. And it's those little pieces of our lives that become part of the purpose that allow us to complete the big picture for everyone. Well, I know we are running out of time this evening, but in our last few moments, I do want to say Coach Jayme is going to be at our next Unbreakable conference, which is August 22nd. She is going to be on our mindset panel, mindset/mind shift, because she's going to probably, I know she's going to share some of this stuff, but I know she's going to be going even deeper with that. And we have some amazing women that are going to be partnering with us at Unbreakable Women's Conference to go a little deeper with you. And I hope that you'll consider that. That's August 22nd in Austin, Texas, at the original Austin Women's Club, a beautiful place and really a great place to find community and to dig into the 7 pillars of an unbreakable life. Coach Jayme, I know people are going to be like, how do I connect? And how do I stay with this amazing woman who I've now fallen in love with, right? How can people work with you, connect with you, and cheer you on and encourage you to finish that book?
Yes. So luckily my name is spelt accordingly on the screen because I am the Jayme with no eyes. But feel free. I always tell people, not that you would need the approval, but cyberstalk me. You can add me on Facebook, Jayme Sharla. I am on Instagram as Jayme the Coach. You can go to my website, coachjayme.com, if you're interested in potentially working with one another. About half my business is men, so I work with men and women both, all around the world. I have my podcast, Make Time for Your Mind with Coach Jayme. And I do believe those would probably be the best areas to connect. And again, I am just super honored to be able to be a part of this incredible conference, because clearly, Theresa, what you're doing is one day at a time, just literally changing the world and all of the women, not even just for right now, it's just here in Austin, but I have no doubt that it's going to be continuing to grow tremendously. So, do you mind? I don't want to obviously intrude on whatever you're about to wrap up with, but I do want to finish with a quote / scripture that I feel is very appropriate, if you don't mind me sharing.
The stage is yours.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So this is honestly, arguably, probably my favorite scripture in the Bible. And it's actually probably one of my favorite books in the Bible as well. And it seems just very fitting with where this conversation has went. And I think that this would tie it all together perfectly. But it is in Ecclesiastes, and it is chapter 3, a time for everything.
Yes.
For everything, there is a season, a time for every activity under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to harvest, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to tear down and a time to build up, a time to cry and a time to laugh, a time to grieve and a time to dance, a time to scatter stones and a time to gather stones, a time to embrace and a time to turn away, a time to search and a time to quit searching, a time to keep and a time to throw away, a time to tear and a time to mend, a time to be quiet and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time for war and a time for peace. Almost done. What do people really get for all their hard work? I have seen the burden God placed on us all. Yet God has made everything beautiful for its own time. He has planted eternity in the human heart, but even so, people cannot see the whole scope of God's work from beginning to end.
So beautiful. And a time to be open. Yes. And that's what all this is about, is to have an open mind. Because if we truly are trying to control the outcome, we just lost all of those beautiful seasons that you talked about in Ecclesiastes. Yes. I love that, Jayme. Coach Jayme, I adore you, and I am so grateful to be your friend and to run this wonderful race with you, and that this is our season of friendship, right? I think that's so cool how God puts people in our paths, and how we've got a lot of work to do, and our work is joyful, and we get to help people see things from a new perspective, because we want to help you be the hero in your own story. Right. And that's what we get to do with Unbreakable Life and through Coach Jayme. So God bless you all. Thank you for joining us this evening. Go back and watch the replay. Share it with a friend if you know of somebody who could utilize these words of wisdom, or perhaps some of those quotes, or now they're going to go check out James and the Giant Peach, right? But thank you all for being with us. Until next time, do everything you can to build that unbreakable life, because you are worth it. God bless you all. Thank you. And we will see you soon.